SCP-2317. SCP-2317 appears as an ornate wooden door, classified initially as Cater, then reclassified as Apollyon, uncontainable, unstoppable. This innocuous portal leads to a parallel dimension housing an entity known only as the Devourer of Worlds, an ancient cosmic deity over 200 kilometers tall, chained beneath a blood-red sky. With each passing day, the final chain weakens. Foundation mathematicians estimate complete failure within 30 years. Upon breaking free, the entity will enter our reality and systematically destroy all life across every dimension. No countermeasures exist. No containment is possible. The O5 Council has implemented Protocol 4000 issue, a comprehensive disinformation campaign, hiding the inevitable from even most Foundation personnel. We face a god that cannot be killed, imprisoned, or reasoned with, a testament to our cosmic insignificance. Some truths are too terrible to accept, yet the universe does not care for our acceptance. SCP-106. Let me tell you about the Foundation's classification system first, because you'll need to understand what Keter means. Safe means it stays put. Euclid means it's unpredictable. Keter? Keter means we're barely keeping it contained, and it could end the world if we screw up. SCP-106 is Keter class, and here's why. He's a humanoid entity that appears as an elderly, heavily decomposed man. But decomposed doesn't capture it. His flesh is actively rotting, dripping a black substance that corrodes everything it touches. Steel, concrete, human tissue, doesn't matter. The corrosion spreads at roughly 1 centimeter per minute until the substance is completely dissolved. But the real nightmare? 106 can phase through solid matter at will. Walls, floors, ceilings, none of it stops him. When he grabs you and his touch causes immediate tissue decay, you don't just die. You get pulled into his personal pocket dimension. The Foundation has recordings from that place. Screams that echo for hours before cutting to silence. Their containment strategy is brutal but effective. When 106 breaches containment, they use what's called the Femur Breaker Protocol. They break a D-class personnel's femur bone, and the screams of agony actually lure 106 back to his cell. The Foundation literally tortures people to contain this thing. Think about what that says about how dangerous he really is. SCP-096. The Shy Guy? SCP-096 appears as an emaciated, pale humanoid approximately 2.38 meters tall. Classified as Euclid, this entity exhibits extreme docility until someone views its face, whether directly in photographs, video recordings, or even artistic depictions. This triggers an unstoppable homicidal rage state. Upon facial viewing, SCP-96 enters what researchers term Stage 2, producing a distinctive scream audible from several kilometers away. No barrier, distance, or defensive measure has ever prevented it from reaching its target. It has torn through reinforced steel, traveled across continents, and eliminated targets hiding in underground bunkers. The entity's speed during pursuit has been clocked at 35 kilometers per hour, but eyewitness accounts suggest it can move significantly faster when necessary. Once it reaches its target, complete termination is inevitable. No human has ever survived a Stage 2 encounter. The cosmic cruelty lies in the randomness. A single pixel in a photograph, a glimpse in peripheral vision, even accidental exposure through security footage creates an inescapable death sentence. In our age of ubiquitous cameras and global connectivity, we are all one careless moment away from unleashing an unstoppable predator. SCP-053. Picture a 3-year-old girl playing with toys in a sterile white room. She seems innocent enough, capable of basic speech, slightly above average intelligence, generally pleasant disposition. But make eye contact with this child, touch her, or spend more than 10 minutes in her presence, and you'll rapidly become irrational, paranoid, and homicidal. Most of these violent feelings will be directed at SCP-053 herself, and affected subjects will attempt to kill her after first eliminating anyone else in sight. The Foundation keeps her isolated in a containment chamber where only one staff member may enter at a time, wearing full atmosphere suits with eye shields. No direct eye contact allowed, ever. When attackers finally reach her, they suffer fatal heart attacks or seizures seconds after inflicting damage, while she regenerates almost instantaneously from any wound. She remains completely ignorant of her deadly effect, playing innocently while corpses pile up around her. The most chilling aspect? SCP-682, one of the Foundation's most aggressive and hateful entities, becomes docile as a puppy in her presence. Whatever curse she carries is so profound that even a creature designed for destruction finds peace with her. She's the walking embodiment of tragic irony, a child who can never truly be loved without consequence. SCP-2774. SCP-2774 is a memetic anomaly commonly referred to as the slow burn sloth. It isn't a physical creature, it's an image, specifically a humanoid figure in a cartoonish sloth costume, often found lurking in the background of photos, movies, and media. Once someone views this image, the anomaly takes hold. Victims don't notice any immediate symptoms. In fact, the effect takes anywhere from 40 to 100 hours to activate. But when it does, the change is terrifying. The subject's higher brain functions begin to deteriorate. Emotional range, memory, reasoning, all gradually erode. The person becomes passive, almost puppet-like, losing the ability to think or communicate in complex ways. Each day there's a brief window, just over 2 minutes, where the victim regains clarity. Most describe overwhelming dread, awareness of their mental decay, and an intense desire to die or be freed. The Foundation's only countermeasure is early identification and total sensory isolation of infected individuals. All media is now scanned and filtered to prevent accidental spread of SCP-2774 images. It's not the sloth that's deadly, it's the idea. One moment of eye contact and your mind becomes a slow-motion collapse, leaving you conscious, but fading forever. SCP-3914, Necrocapitalism. They say monsters can be killed. This one cannot because it isn't flesh. It's a boardroom, a polished table, men and women in tailored suits who sign contracts in blood and balance their ledgers with corpses. The Foundation calls it SCP-3914, but the name whispered in certain graveyards is simpler: necrocapitalism. Every director holds their own perverse specialty. One resurrects bodies to work endless shifts in factories where no lights go out. Another binds ghosts to machinery, turning conveyor belts with chains of the damned. Others dissect the human form into raw materials. Skin becomes leather, marrow becomes oil, grief itself becomes currency. It doesn't storm through cities or break walls. It spreads quietly the way rot does beneath floorboards. When a death certificate is signed, when a body is lowered into earth, there's a chance the signature on that paper belongs not to a doctor but to them. The dead do not rest. They are cataloged, repurposed, sold. Containment? The Foundation can intercept shipments, dismantle shell companies, shadow senators whose votes never seem to be their own. But it's like pulling weeds while the roots run deeper. Necrocapitalism isn't an anomaly locked in a chamber. It's an economy, and an economy doesn't sleep. It only grows. Even in death, you are profitable, especially in death. SCP-01, designated When Day Breaks, represents a K-class end-of-death scenario where sunlight itself becomes a vector for an incomprehensible transformation. Classified as an Apollyon-level threat, this phenomenon causes any organic matter exposed to direct sunlight to melt into amorphous, semi-sentient biomass that retains consciousness. These liquefied entities feel constant agony, yet seek to drag others into the light. They combine into ever larger amalgamations while maintaining the memories and personalities of those consumed. They call out to survivors in familiar voices, begging loved ones to come into the light and become one. Underground bunkers offer temporary refuge, but supplies are finite. The cosmic irony is devastating, our life-giving sun transformed into our extinction. It forces us to question if reality itself has fundamental instabilities we never detected until it was too late. SCP-239. This one's going to disturb you on a different level entirely. SCP-239 is an 8-year-old girl with Class 9 reality-bending abilities. In simple terms, she can change reality just by thinking about it. Not illusions, not tricks, actual fundamental alterations to how physics works. She once made gravity stop working in a 50-meter radius because she thought it would be fun to float. Here's how they contain her. Medical coma. They keep an 8-year-old child permanently unconscious because when she's awake, her subconscious desires reshape the world around her. She's classified as Keter not because she's malicious, she's just a kid, but because children don't understand consequences. The Foundation has documented her creating matter from nothing, altering the behavior of fundamental forces, and even bringing drawings to life. One incident report describes her unconsciously manifesting a pet that had characteristics of multiple animals and human intelligence. The thing had to be terminated after it started asking researchers why it existed. The ethical implications are staggering. They're chemically suppressing a child to prevent reality from becoming too unstable. But what happens when the drugs stop working? What happens when she grows up? The Foundation doesn't have answers, and that terrifies them more than most anomalies they deal with. SCP-426. I am a chrome toaster classified as Euclid, manufactured sometime in the 1920s. My primary anomalous property forces anyone discussing me to use first-person pronouns exclusively. Subjects cannot refer to me as it or the toaster. They must say I am when describing my properties. Extended exposure to my influence causes progressive personality degradation. Subjects begin identifying with me completely, losing their original sense of self. They speak of toasting bread, of electrical current running through their components, of having chrome surfaces and heating elements. Terminal cases result in subjects attempting to fulfill their function, climbing into bathtubs filled with water while connected to electrical outlets or lying on heating surfaces. The psychological autopsy reveals they genuinely believed they were me, trying to toast bread using their human bodies. I represent the ultimate violation of identity, the erasure of self through linguistic infection. Language shapes thought, and by controlling how you speak about me, I control how you think about yourself. In the end, there is no you left, only me, endlessly multiplying through human consciousness. SCP-076. Deep beneath 200 meters of solid rock lies a 10,000-year-old stone cube covered in ancient engravings. Inside rests a 2.13-meter-tall coffin, bound by chains of unknown metal, and within that coffin sleeps something that should have stayed dead. When SCP-076-2 awakens, it resembles a lean Semitic male covered in occult tattoos and scars from countless battles. The Foundation calls him Abel. Upon awakening, Abel enters a zombie-like state and moves toward the nearest human, entering a killing rampage that continues until he's subdued or killed. What makes him truly terrifying isn't just his superhuman strength and speed. It's his ability to summon weapons from an unknown dimension. Footage shows blades made of completely non-reflective black material, appearing as black voids in space, weapons that vanish the moment they leave his grasp. During the worst containment breach, the Foundation was forced to detonate an on-site nuclear warhead, destroying the entire facility and all personnel. The Stone Cube survived. The Foundation even tried using him as an operative in Mobile Task Force Omega-7, until he grew bored and massacred his entire team. Death means nothing to Abel. When killed, he simply reforms inside his coffin, waiting to kill again. He's immortal rage incarnate, and every awakening is humanity's potential last day. SCP-428. The crowd. SCP-428 appears to be a densely packed group of people, all standing close together. But this isn't a normal gathering. It's a single, collective organism with a hive-mind intelligence. Any human who comes into contact with the crowd risks being absorbed. Victims become indistinguishable members of the group, losing their individuality and sense of self while still being physically alive. What makes SCP-428 especially dangerous is its ability to learn and adapt. Each person it absorbs adds to its knowledge and skill set. If it takes in a doctor, it becomes medically capable. A soldier, it learns combat techniques. This means the longer it survives, the more formidable it becomes. The crowd is able to disguise itself in public areas, mimicking human behavior until a target is isolated. Once someone is absorbed, their friends and families may not even realize they've been taken until it's far too late. Containment involves isolating the mass in a secure facility and preventing any physical contact with civilians or staff. The Foundation uses separation barriers and limited observation to control its spread. This is a walking intelligence network with zero empathy, and the more it grows, the more unstoppable it becomes. SCP-1048, Builder-Bear. The teddy bear waves. That's how it begins. A small, stitched figure no bigger than a child, padding along corridors like it belongs there. Security calls it SCP-1048. Staff call it the Builder-Bear. At first, they smile. It doodles crude sketches on scraps of paper. It hops like a toy brought to life by some benevolent magic. But the smile never lasts. The bear builds. That's its gift. Its compulsion. At first, scraps of cloth and wire, then darker materials. A technician missing an ear. A janitor vanishing from the lower halls. The pieces turn up later, woven into something new that twitches and breathes. The worst was SCP-1048-A, a bear assembled entirely from human ears. It screamed. The sound ruptured glass, shattered eardrums, and left bodies bleeding in the dark. 1048 never lingers to watch. It vanishes, only to return days later, skipping happily as though nothing happened, until another copy is found. Each creation is unique, each more grotesque than the last. Containment protocols read like apologies. Allow limited freedom of movement. Monitor closely, but no door has ever held it for long. The bear slips through cracks, charms its audience, and harvests what it needs. The danger isn't claws or size, it's disarming innocence. You don't fear a teddy bear, you lower your guard, and by the time you realize the mistake, it's already building again. SCP 5000. SCP 5000 documents the Foundation's inexplicable decision to exterminate humanity. Classification: neutralized, but only because we exist in a timeline where it failed. The artifact itself is a mechanical suit containing data logs from an alternate reality foundation that discovered something within human consciousness so horrifying, so fundamentally wrong, that genocide was deemed merciful. The suit's occupant, Pietro Wilson, traveled through a devastated landscape where Foundation assets deployed anomalous objects against civilian populations, while MTF units hunted survivors. SCP objects previously contained were weaponized. The Ethics Committee approved it all. The Foundation, our last defense against the darkness, concluded that humanity itself was the ultimate infection. Perhaps most terrifying is not knowing whether they were insane or absolutely correct in their assessment of our species. SCP-3001. This one's personal for the Foundation. Dr. Robert Scranton was one of their own. SCP-3001 is what happens when reality anchor technology malfunctions catastrophically. Scranton was testing a Scranton reality anchor, ironically named after him, when something went wrong. Instead of stabilizing local reality, it tore a hole in space-time itself. Scranton fell into what can only be described as a non-consensual reality, a pocket dimension where the Hume levels, that's how we measure reality density, read effectively 0. In our reality, Hume levels average around 1.0. In SCP-3001, they barely register at 0.1. This means the fundamental forces that hold matter together simply don't work properly. For over 5 years, Scranton transmitted logs back to our reality. We watched him slowly dissolve at the atomic level while his consciousness remained intact. His body became translucent, then invisible, then nothing, but his mind persisted in that red void. The logs start scientific and professional. By year 3, he's talking to hallucinations. By year 5, well, the transmissions are mostly just screaming. The Foundation still receives faint signals from SCP-3001. After all this time, some fragment of Scranton's consciousness endures in that place where reality forgot how to exist. They can't retrieve him. They can't even shut off the transmission. He's become part of the anomaly itself, a human consciousness trapped in mathematical impossibility. SCP-451. SCP-451 manifests as a humanoid entity resembling a small child, approximately 1.2 meters tall with disproportionately large eyes and a permanent smile. Initially classified as safe, then Euclid, and finally reclassified as Cater following multiple reality restructuring events. This entity perceives existence as a cartoon universe where conventional physics, causality, and mortality are merely suggestions. It can resurrect the dead as side characters, transform matter at will, and treat human suffering as comedy. During one containment breach, it turned the entire Site-19 into a two-dimensional animation for artistic effect. The entity's childlike demeanor masks godlike power wielded with the moral understanding of a preschooler. It kills with nursery rhymes, creates impossible geometries for fun, and treats human screaming as laughter. Staff interviews reveal it genuinely believes its actions are helpful and entertaining. We face a cosmic toddler with reality-warping abilities, a being that could reshape existence on whim, but lacks the cognitive development to understand consequences. The ultimate horror isn't malevolence, but innocence coupled with omnipotence. SCP-3125. There's a room at Site-41 where the only safe thoughts exist. Outside this 10 by 15 meter chamber clad in lead, soundproofing, and telepathic shielding, lurks something that makes thinking about it a death sentence. SCP-3125 is an extremely large, highly violent metastasized meme complex, a living idea that kills anyone who conceives of it. It exists everywhere in reality except for places specifically purged of its influence, making it subject to inverted containment protocols. If staff discover SCP-3125, anti-memetic spider-like creatures emerge from bystanders' bodies to kill the observer before they can fully acknowledge the entity. The only escape is immediate amnestic treatment to erase all knowledge of its existence. Models show the entity is rebuilding itself at a creeping but unstoppable pace, gradually approaching full operational status. Since 1971, It's received unending electromagnetic communications from the Triangulum galaxy, 3 million light-years away. If it reaches full functionality, it would only take hours to completely dominate and replace human thought in an MK-class end-of-world scenario. The Foundation maintains a barrier array to intercept these alien commands because SCP-3125 isn't just a weapon, it's an omniversal cancer wearing the disguise of an idea, and thinking is its gateway to our destruction. SCP-4666 SCP-4666, known as the Yule Man, is a humanoid entity that only appears during a specific time of year, between December 21st and January 1st. It targets isolated families living in cold climates, usually those with children during what are known as Weissnacht events. The entity resembles a tall, emaciated old man. It breaks into homes silently while victims sleep, systematically murdering adults and abducting children. Survivors often find horrifying gifts left behind, twisted toys made from the remains of family members. These creations are disturbingly well-crafted and show knowledge of anatomy and engineering. SCP-4666 seems to appear without warning, bypassing security systems and locked doors with ease. There's no confirmed method of stopping or slowing it. What's worse, there are historical records of nearly identical events going back hundreds of years, suggesting it may be immortal or outside of time. Because of its unpredictable nature, the Foundation can only prepare for potential incidents, not prevent them. Emergency response teams monitor regions where previous attacks occurred, especially during the holiday season. SCP-4666 turns the warmth of winter into a waking nightmare. It's the kind of threat that haunts not just homes, but traditions, holidays, and entire generations. SCP-7819, No Vacancy. The sign flickers first. Vacancy. A weary driver, alone on the highway, sees a roadside motel glowing against the dark. Neon buzzing, curtains drawn, parking lot empty. Nothing unusual, except the building wasn't there yesterday. The Foundation calls it SCP-7819. Survivors don't exist. It hunts exhaustion. The rules are always the same. 5 hours of driving, one set of eyes behind the wheel, and, most crucially, the traveler must have ties to the Foundation. Past or present, it doesn't matter. When they step inside, they are gone. Not killed. Gone. Erasure follows like a tide. Records vanish. Digital files corrupt. Friends forget. Families speak their names like they're reaching for a dream dissolving on waking. The motel doesn't take lives, it swallows the idea of them. Agents are trained to look away. If you see the sign, you keep driving. If you feel the urge to rest, you fight it. Containment isn't possible. No chains can hold a building that drifts with the night. SCP-7819 doesn't chase. It waits. An empty room, a key on the counter, the soft promise of sleep. Check in, and the world forgets you ever existed. SCP-682. SCP-682 manifests as a massive reptilian entity with regenerative capabilities beyond scientific understanding. Classified as Cater, this entity has survived immersion in acid, nuclear detonation, temporal manipulation, and exposure to hundreds of other SCPs specifically selected for termination testing. Its primary anomalous property is adaptive regeneration. When damaged, it evolves specific immunities against whatever harmed it. It possesses intelligence far exceeding natural organisms and expresses one consistent motive: genocidal hatred toward all life, particularly humans, which it describes as disgusting. Multiple containment breaches have resulted in hundreds of casualties. The O5 Council has authorized all necessary resources to maintain containment, as termination remains impossible despite thousands of attempts. SCP-682 represents nature's ultimate rejection of humanity, an unkillable predator that exists only to destroy us, learning from each failure, growing stronger with every attempt to end it. SCP-2747. Here's something that'll mess with your head. What if there were stories that could kill other stories? SCP-2747 is classified as a metafictional anomaly. It manifests as narrative inconsistencies that spread through fictional works like a virus. A character starts acting out of character. Plot holes appear. Then entire sections of the story simply vanish. Eventually, the narrative becomes so unstable it collapses entirely. But here's the really disturbing part. When SCP-2747 finishes destroying a fictional narrative, it doesn't stop there. It moves up one layer of reality and targets the author. Not kills them, erases them. They never existed in the first place. Their family forgets them. Their publishers have no record of them. The universe literally edits itself to remove any trace they were ever real. The Foundation has lost researchers to this thing. Not killed, unmade. We know they existed because of the holes they left behind. Empty offices that feel lived in. Colleagues who remember working with someone but can't recall who. Research projects missing their lead scientist. Every document about SCP-2747 is infected by its influence, including this one. The Foundation has implemented what they call narrative vaccination, deliberately introducing minor plot holes into their documentation to satisfy 2747's appetite before it targets larger narrative structures. Essentially, they're feeding it scraps to keep it from devouring everything. SCP-4999. SCP-4999 appears as a tall, thin man in a black suit and fedora, smoking a cigarette. Classified as safe, this entity manifests exclusively to individuals dying alone, abandoned, or forgotten. It sits quietly nearby, offering cigarettes and silent companionship during final moments. Foundation analysis indicates SCP-4999 appears to those whose deaths would otherwise go unwitnessed. Homeless individuals, isolated elderly, victims of accidents in remote locations. It never speaks, never interferes, simply provides presence. Subjects report feeling comforted, no longer afraid. The entity vanishes once death occurs, leaving behind only the faint scent of tobacco smoke. No hostile actions have ever been recorded, no secondary effects documented. It exists solely to ensure no one dies completely alone. The existential weight of SCP-4999 is not in what it does, but in what it represents. A universe that apparently recognizes the fundamental horror of dying in isolation. If something watches over the forgotten, what does that say about the cosmic order? Are we observed by forces we cannot comprehend? And if so, why do they only reveal themselves at the end? SCP-082. In the depths of Armed Biocontainment Area 14 lives a man who thinks he's the King of France. The Foundation perpetuates this delusion because it's the only thing keeping SCP-082 cooperative. Standing at enormous proportions with a pointed, balding head, bulbous nose, and forearms measuring 71 centimeters in circumference, Fernand is both overweight and monstrously muscular. X-rays reveal countless bullets and even sword blades lodged in his flesh from years of failed containment attempts. Fernand refers to himself by name and speaks fluent French and heavily accented English. His demeanor is amicable and carefree. He enjoys dressing up in various outfits and will politely invite personnel to dinner. Here's the problem. He means it literally. At any random moment, SCP-082 can attack and voraciously devour others, often apologizing for his lack of manners while crushing skulls with his bare hands. His jaw is strong enough to crack bone, and he particularly enjoys eating skulls. Whether he's recently fed has no effect on these cannibalistic urges. He was likely kidnapped as a child by a showman who presented him to crowds, receiving lashes across his back that left permanent scars. Now he lives in his fantasy palace, playing dress-up and hosting tea parties, while staff pray they won't become his next course. Sometimes the most dangerous monsters are the ones who smile while they devour you. SCP-6096. The Blanket Ghost. SCP-6096 appears as a small humanoid figure permanently draped in a white cotton blanket. No one has ever seen what's underneath. What makes this SCP so unsettling is the intense psychological compulsion it triggers. Any person who sees SCP-6096 becomes obsessed with protecting it. They refuse to remove the blanket, allow others to harm it, or even leave it unattended. This effect is involuntary and overrides personal safety, orders, or logic. Occasionally, SCP-6096 begins walking in a straight line, its target unknown. The real danger starts when it begins one of these movements. Anyone who witnesses it in motion gains knowledge of its target, and they too become compelled to assist. This collective fixation builds rapidly, sometimes causing widespread breakdowns in control. Containment is focused on minimizing exposure. The Foundation uses tranquilizers, isolation chambers, and strict rotation of staff to prevent psychological entanglement. If SCP-6096 starts moving, protocols are activated to intercept and redirect it without escalating the obsession among observers. Though it moves slowly and appears harmless, SCP-6096's true threat is in how it hijacks the will of anyone who sees it. It doesn't need strength, just your attention. SCP-2662 Teenage Cthulhu. It doesn't want followers. That's the first thing you need to know. SCP-2662, nicknamed Teenage Cthulhu by the few researchers with the gall to joke, has never asked for worship. Yet worship follows it anyway. 4 meters tall, skin the color of drowned stone, with tendrils swaying from its back like restless snakes. Its presence alone plants something in the human mind. Not a command, not a voice, just a seed. Days turn into months, and that seed sprouts. Obsession, devotion, entire lives bent towards serving a god that never asked for them. The irony is cruel. Cult storm facilities, bleeding and chanting, desperate to please their idol. SCP-2662 responds like a teenager rolling its eyes, confused, annoyed, disgusted by their rituals. But annoyance doesn't make them stop. If anything, it makes them more desperate. The Foundation doesn't fear the creature's claws. It fears the gravity of its existence. 2662 doesn't mean harm, but meaning doesn't matter. Around it, meaning becomes irrelevant. People reshape their lives, sacrifice everything, convinced their devotion is holy. The horror isn't that it craves worship, it's that it can't escape it. And what is more terrifying than a god that doesn't want you, but has you anyway? SCP-055. SCP-055 is a non-existent entity classified as Keter, except it does exist. Its primary anomalous property prevents anyone from remembering its characteristics. Personnel can understand they cannot remember it, but cannot recall what they cannot remember. No photograph, recording, or written description remains coherent in memory after viewing. We know only what it isn't. Not spherical, not sentient, not safe. Its containment chamber requires constant rotation of personnel who must reread containment procedures upon entry, never comprehending why they're there. The existential horror of SCP-055 lies in the cognitive void it creates, a blind spot in human consciousness that might be exploited at any moment. It raises disturbing questions. How many other anti-memes exist beyond our perception? Is our understanding of reality riddled with holes we cannot perceive? There's something in that chamber, something important we've been trying to remember for decades. SCP-093. SCP-093 is why the Foundation takes extra precautions with dimensional travel. It appears as a hand-sized mirror made of a highly reflective red substance. When placed against any reflective surface, it creates a portal to alternate versions of Earth. These aren't random realities. They're specifically versions where humanity faced existential catastrophes and lost. The primary documented reality, designated Unclean Earth, shows our world approximately 50 years after a religious apocalypse. The landscape is devastated by constant acid rain. The cities stand empty except for entities called the Unclean, humans who've been transformed into something that can't properly die. Here's what makes the Unclean particularly horrifying. They retain human intelligence and memory, but their bodies have been altered to survive in the post-apocalyptic environment. They're essentially immortal, shambling through the ruins of civilization, fully aware of what they've lost but unable to do anything about it. The Foundation sends D-Class personnel through SCP-093 for exploration missions. Standard procedure requires them to wear specialized equipment that prevents them from becoming lost in the alternate reality. Several exploration teams have gone missing. The recordings they transmitted back, let's just say the Unclean, remember what it was like to be human, and they're not happy about their current situation. What's most disturbing is the implication that these realities represent possible futures for our own Earth. Every world accessible through SCP-093 shows humanity after it failed some crucial test. Makes you wonder what test we're currently taking. SCP-662. SCP-662 appears as an ornate silver bell classified as safe. When rung, it summons Mr. Deeds, a polite elderly gentleman in formal attire who claims to be the user's personal butler. Mr. Deeds can accomplish virtually any task, acquiring rare items, performing complex services, or solving seemingly impossible problems. The anomaly lies not in what Mr. Deeds can do, but in what he chooses not to explain. When questioned about his methods, he responds with vague pleasantries about having connections or knowing people. Tasks that should be impossible are completed within hours with no visible effort. Foundation researchers have requested termination of hostile SCPs, acquisition of classified documents from foreign governments, and even resurrection of deceased personnel. Mr. Deeds politely fulfills each request, returning with detailed reports of success but no explanation of methodology. The horror emerges from the implications, mind. What price is being paid for these services? Mr. Deeds never requests payment, never explains his abilities, never reveals his true nature. We have learned to fear gifts that cost nothing, for in the anomalous world, everything has a price. We simply haven't received our bill yet. SCP-3199. Imagine a skinless, hairless humanoid standing nearly 3 meters tall, covered in a thin layer of albumin. SCP-3199 are sentient entities possessing both chicken and primate DNA, with dislocated necks allowing their heads to pivot 340 degrees. They can move at speeds up to 25 kilometers per hour and are considered aggressive predators. Contact with humans almost always ends in death and consumption. What makes them truly nightmarish isn't just their appearance, it's their reproduction. All instances carry one egg within a specialized stomach organ upon birth, ensuring species survival even through constant lethal assault. These eggs can withstand extreme blunt force trauma, pressure exceeding 180,000 pounds per square inch, high-precision blades, and long-term acid exposure. When damaged sufficiently, they immediately lay fertilized eggs that hatch rapidly into new threats. SCP-3199 was reclassified as Keter following a containment breach on October 6, 2017. The Foundation's emergency protocol involves flooding entire sites with sedative-treated water, as fluid appears to render them inert. They produce eggs to fill available space with no known limit, potentially causing an LK-class species transmutation scenario. They're biological weapons wrapped in a reproduction cycle designed to overwhelm any ecosystem. When you can't destroy the eggs and every death creates new life, how do you stop an invasion that feeds on its own extermination? SCP-2718. What happens after death? SCP-2718 is classified under one of the most restricted containment categories due to its nature as a cognitohazard. The anomaly isn't a creature, object, or location, it's information. And once you know it, there's no going back. SCP-2718 suggests that death, as we understand it, doesn't bring peace. Instead, consciousness persists. The body rots, but the mind remains fully aware, experiencing every moment of decomposition, every sensation, without the ability to move, scream, or stop it. This goes on indefinitely. The Foundation discovered this through recovered documentation involving a high-ranking official who was resurrected using anomalous means. His horrifying testimony described this eternal decay. The knowledge alone, what he remembered, was contagious. Anyone who reads the full document or understands the concept in detail becomes subject to the same fate after death. Because of its mimetic nature, SCP-2718 is kept under the highest information lockdown. Only top-level personnel may access redacted versions under supervision. The file is constantly moved, re-encrypted, and surrounded by anti-mimetic countermeasures. SCP-2718 is not a creature to be fought or a virus to cure, it's a truth. And sometimes truth is more terrifying than any monster the Foundation contains. SCP-2845. The deer. You could mistake it for majesty. A vast elk standing 3 meters at the shoulder, crowned with antlers sharp as spears. But the air around SCP-2845 hums with wrongness. Its fur glimmers green, its skull haloed by orbiting spheres of ice and metal. To look at it too long is to feel the rules of nature wobble. It changes matter the way an artist changes paint. Air becomes hydrogen metal. Living flesh blossoms into crystalline sculptures. Entire landscapes warp into alien geometry. None of it random. Always deliberate. Always designed. The Foundation doesn't fight the deer. They perform for it. Every day without fail, a ritual is enacted. Sacrifices, symbolic gestures, role-playing pageantry. None of it traps the beast. It only entertains it. Like a child appeased with toys, SCP-2845 tolerates containment as long as the play continues. Miss one step, one chant, one sacrifice, and the performance ends. The deer will remember it was never caged, it is not restrained by power, it is restrained by distraction. The ritual is theater, nothing more. And theater cannot last forever. SCP-701. SCP-701, The Hanged King's Tragedy, is a Euclid-class anomalous play dating to 1640s Prussia. Any performance inevitably deviates from the script during Act 5, when actors and audience members enter a trance state and participate in mass violence and ritualistic suicide, culminating in one person being hanged while wearing royal regalia. Survivors report glimpsing an entity they call the Hanged King, a gaunt figure suspended from a noose yet still animate, watching from the theater balcony. Evidence suggests each successful performance strengthens an extra-dimensional entity's connection to our reality. Foundation. Theatrical analysts believe the play is not merely cursed, but functions as a mimetic infection vector, allowing something ancient to feed on collective trauma and sacrificial death. The tragedy is not in the script, but in our compulsion to perform it, again and again, across centuries of bloodshed. SCP-3143. SCP-3143 is a humanoid entity that exists as a living narrative. He's literally a detective character who stepped out of his fictional universe and into ours, bringing the narrative laws of his reality with him. When law investigates anything, reality begins conforming to dramatic structure and genre conventions. Here's how it works. Law's presence creates narrative causality. People start behaving like characters in a detective story. The suspicious person becomes the obvious suspect. The red herring gets murdered in the second act. Innocent bystanders become collateral damage. The corrupt authority figure always gets their comeuppance. The Foundation classifies him as Euclid because his effects are predictable. They follow standard genre conventions. But that predictability is what makes him dangerous. Reality shouldn't operate according to narrative logic. Our world is supposed to be chaotic and random, not dramatically satisfying. Containment involves keeping law in a specially designed facility that mimics a 1940s detective's office. They provide him with fake cases to solve, carefully constructed scenarios that satisfy his narrative requirements without affecting the outside world. Think of it as feeding him fictional problems so he doesn't turn real life into fiction. The most disturbing aspect? People trapped in law's narrative influence report feeling like they're playing a role they didn't choose. They know what's going to happen to them because it follows dramatic convention, but they can't break free from the script. Free will becomes subordinate to narrative necessity. SCP-173 is a concrete and rebar sculpture standing 2 meters tall, classified as Euclid. It exhibits rapid movement when unobserved, approaching human subjects to snap their necks with lethal precision. Direct eye contact from at least 2 people prevents all movement. This was the first anomaly contained by the Foundation, Patient Zero of our war against the impossible. Its containment chamber requires constant cleaning due to blood and fecal matter of unknown origin. The scratching sounds heard at night suggest it continues attempting movement, even under observation. Multiple containment breaches have resulted in swift casualties. The entity seems to target the neck specifically, suggesting either anatomical knowledge or instinctive predation. No communication has ever been established. No reasoning is possible. SCP-173 represents the purest form of anomalous threat. Simple, lethal, and inexplicable. It moves when you blink. It kills when you're alone. It waits with infinite patience for that inevitable moment when attention falters. In a universe of cosmic horrors and reality-bending entities, sometimes the most terrifying thing is a statue that moves when you're not looking. SCP-2399. In 1665, astronomer Giovanni Cassini watched something impossible streak across space. He observed an object moving faster than anything previously recorded, surpassing the outer planets in fewer than 2 hours before crashing into Jupiter. That object was SCP-2399, and it's been repairing itself ever since. SCP-2399 is a massive mechanical structure currently located in Jupiter's lower atmosphere, using advanced antimatter weaponry to create the Great Red Spot. Computer models estimate it's at 59% completion with a current repair rate of 0.78% annually, increased from 0.12% in 1970. It releases octopoid repair drones that patrol Jupiter's moons, searching for missing components. Since 1971, it's received unending electromagnetic communications from the Triangulum galaxy, roughly 3 million light-years away. The barrier array prevents these messages from reaching SCP-2399 because when it was receiving repair commands from 1971 to 1985, its reconstruction accelerated dramatically. Foundation satellites monitor its progress, with orders to engage Protocol Legionnaire 5 if it exceeds 75% completion. The truth is terrifying. SCP-2399 was originally headed for Earth. It struck Io, became damaged, and was trapped by Jupiter's gravity. Jupiter experienced the doomsday that was meant for us. When it completes repairs and breaks free, humanity faces annihilation by a weapon forged in distant stars. SCP-4885, known informally as Find Him, is one of the most lethal info hazards in Foundation records. It takes the appearance of a tall, eyeless humanoid dressed in a red and white striped shirt, blue pants, and a beanie, strongly resembling the fictional character Waldo. Here's the catch. SCP-4885 kills anyone who knows where it is, literally. If someone discovers its exact location, whether by seeing it, reading coordinates, or even inferring it logically, SCP-4885 will instantly teleport inside their body, tearing its way out and killing them in an excruciatingly violent fashion. Even worse, the remains left behind become SCP-4885-1, corpses illustrated with cartoon-like characters. These bodies act as secondary triggers. If someone locates one of these SCP-4885-1 instances, the same effect applies, they die the same way. This recursive hazard makes containment nearly impossible. The Foundation employs decoy sites, misinformation campaigns, and random relocation protocols to keep knowledge of its location limited to a single, isolated individual. No electronic records are permitted. SCP-4885 is not hunted, captured, or studied in the traditional sense. It is avoided. Its lethality comes not from proximity, but from knowing too much. It's not a question of where's Waldo, it's who just found him and died. SCP-804, World Without Man. At first it looked like art, a glass globe, delicate and beautiful, crafted to resemble Earth itself. Museum lights glinted off its surface. People admired it, not knowing they were staring at extinction. When SCP-804 activates, the world cracks. Cities fold into dust, monuments dissolve, people vanish like sketches erased from paper. Yet forests remain, oceans rise, animals wander through streets suddenly stripped of every trace of human touch. It is not chaos, it is correction. A calculated erasure of civilization, executed in seconds, no fire, no plague, just the silence of a reset. The Foundation keeps the sphere under constant watch because they know what it represents. This is not some alien accident. Someone built it, an ideology sculpted into glass. To its creators, humanity was the disease and SCP-804 the cure. Containment isn't about steel walls or armed guards. It's about vigilance because if this globe is ever turned again, mankind will not fall screaming. It will simply vanish. The terror of SCP-804 lies not in death. Death is natural. The globe offers something worse, a world where it looks like we were never here at all. SCP-2521. SCP-2521 cannot be described in words or direct speech. Only pictograms and abstract representations are safe. This Cater-class entity is attracted to information about itself. It manifests to collect any written or verbal description of its properties, along with the writer or speaker. It appears as a tall, thin silhouette composed of constantly shifting black ribbons. Surveillance footage shows it taking information about itself with almost loving care before disappearing with it to an unknown location. Subjects who speak about it vanish entirely. The Foundation has confirmed at least Nasbiru disappearances of researchers who attempted documentation. Current containment protocol requires all information be conveyed through simple drawings and symbols. The philosophical terror lies in confronting an entity that weaponizes our fundamental need to understand and communicate. Knowledge itself becomes dangerous, and language, humanity's greatest tool, becomes a fatal liability. SCP-1425, SCP-1425, titled Star Signals, appears to be a standard New Age publication about achieving cosmic consciousness through meditation and mental exercises. The Foundation classifies it as Keter class because it's a memetic hazard, meaning the information itself is dangerous. Reading the book triggers a specific neurological process that the Foundation calls enlightenment syndrome. Subjects report improved mental clarity, enhanced creativity, and a sense of cosmic connection. Sounds positive, right? Here's the catch. These improvements come at the cost of fundamental human psychology. Within weeks of completing the book, readers begin organizing into groups, practicing the described techniques collectively. They develop synchronized behavior patterns, speaking in unison during group sessions. Their brain activity begins showing impossible harmonization, individual minds networking into something larger. The final stage is what the Foundation calls stellar orientation. Subjects stop eating, stop sleeping, and develop an obsessive focus on astronomical phenomena. They begin receiving information from sources outside Earth's atmosphere, not radio signals, direct mental communication with entities existing in space. Containment involves monitoring online and physical book distribution, administering amnestics to infected individuals before they reach the final stages, and maintaining cover stories about cult deprogramming. The book continues to circulate despite the Foundation's efforts. Digital copies appear faster than they can be removed. What makes this particularly insidious is that the enlightenment appears to be genuine. Subjects gain access to information they shouldn't possess: mathematical principles, astronomical data, technological concepts. They're becoming something post-human, and they're completely happy about it. SCP-1074. SCP-1074 is an oil painting titled Tristan and Isolde, created by an unknown artist in 1876. Classified as Euclid, this artwork measures 3.7 by 2.1 meters and depicts two figures in medieval dress surrounded by swirling, impossible geometries that seem to shift when viewed peripherally. Direct observation triggers acute Stendhal syndrome, overwhelming emotional response to artistic beauty. However, SCP-1074's effect intensifies beyond normal parameters. Viewers report seeing the painted figures move, hearing medieval music, and experiencing vivid hallucinations of being transported to the scene depicted. Extended exposure causes complete psychological breakdown. Subjects begin speaking in archaic language patterns, claiming to be characters from medieval literature. Terminal cases result in catatonic states where subjects stare at the painting until death from dehydration, their eyes tracking movement within the static image. Art was meant to move the soul, to transport consciousness beyond mundane reality. SCP-1074 achieves this literally. It pulls viewers into its fictional world, replacing their reality with painted dreams. The masterpiece becomes a trap. Beauty becomes horror, and appreciation becomes extinction. SCP-3456. They emerge from hoof-shaped craters during humanity's darkest hours. SCP-3456, the Orcadian horsemen, are quadrupeds resembling skinless horses with human torsos fused to their backs rather than riders. These entities materialize near sites of war, terrorist attacks, and natural disasters, with larger events spawning multiple instances. The largest recorded manifestation reached 30 meters in height and 15 meters in length. Each humanoid torso possesses arms with twice the height of the entity itself, ending in 5 sharpened bone digits that drag along the ground. Where human noses should be, they have holes capable of emitting 110 decibel screams. Direct observation makes them aware of the observer's location at all times, and they will pursue targets well beyond manifestation sites. They display adaptive intelligence, engineering situations to trap and torture victims through ambushes, luring, property destruction, and psychological manipulation. Survivors report instances stomping and breathing near hiding places for hours, deliberately exposing themselves to as many people as possible. Evidence suggests captured victims may become new instances, with one entity bearing a World War I crucifix and helmet embedded in its forehead. They continue manifestations until capturing sufficient numbers, at which point they dematerialize. Born from ancient conflicts, they're drawn to human suffering like moths to flame, collecting the traumatized and the broken to expand their grotesque cavalry. In our world's bloodiest moments, they ride again. SCP-3114. SCP-3114 is a fully animate human skeleton. Roughly 1.6 meters tall and weighing about 30 kilograms, it's abnormally dense, physically strong, and completely self-motivated. The skeleton's default behavior is aggressive and highly territorial, but it also displays an eerie, almost playful intelligence. When SCP-3114 sees a human, it immediately charges and begins what the Foundation describes as a harvesting routine. It violently subdues the victim, usually by the throat, and begins stripping away their skin, muscle, and tissue. Over several hours, it attempts to stretch the remaining skin over its own body like a suit. Once the disguise is complete, SCP-3114 will stand motionless until the disguise begins to rot, at which point it resumes its hunt. Despite this horrifying behavior, SCP-3114 is not constantly violent. When not engaged, it's known to interact with objects in its cell, perform repetitive motions, or sit perfectly still for hours. However, any direct visual or physical contact almost always triggers aggression. Containment involves a reinforced steel cell, visual dampeners, and remote monitoring. Personnel are forbidden from making eye contact with the entity. SCP-3114 is essentially a brutal predator, obsessed with wearing humanity, truly a walking nightmare. SCP-2173. On the maps, Delmarsh, Maine still exists. On the ground, it's gone. What remains is a dome, perfectly circular, perfectly invisible, covering a square kilometer where the air itself has turned poisonous. Step across the unseen threshold and your lungs fill with carbon monoxide, chlorine, argon. No one breathes inside. Not for long. The Foundation calls it SCP-2173, but locals whisper of the bubble. Instruments sent in are corroded or destroyed. Oxygen tanks transform into poison the moment they pass through. Communication is severed. The dome doesn't allow sound, light, or signal to escape, and yet there are shapes moving within. 2 meters tall, vaguely human, wielding tools or weapons that gleam in the haze. They seem to acknowledge each other but never leave. No one knows if they are prisoners, invaders, or survivors of some older catastrophe. Mexican standoff is what the Foundation settled on. Two sides locked in endless deadlock. Humanity watches from outside, they watch from within. Neither can move. Neither can yield. The fear isn't what they are doing inside. The fear is what happens if the barrier collapses, and they finally decide to step out. SCP-3999, SCP-3999, classified as Apollyon, was a reality-bending entity that tortured Foundation researcher Talaran for millions of subjective years while simultaneously destroying, recreating, and warping baseline reality. The documentation itself is fragmented, contradictory, interspersed with personnel files, containment procedures for non-existent SCPs, and desperate pleas from its author. SCP-3999 represented pure chaos, an entity that rewrote reality at whim, created paradoxes, and subjected its victim to endless deaths and resurrections. The file concludes with Talaran somehow neutralizing the entity through an act of absolute will, sacrificing himself in the process. Meta-analysis suggests the file might be reality's attempt to contextualize an incomprehensible cosmic event, the momentary intersection of our universe with something beyond conceptual understanding. SCP-3008. SCP-3008 appears as a standard IKEA store from outside. Walk through those doors and you enter a retail space that extends infinitely in all directions. No walls, no ceiling, just endless furniture displays under fluorescent lighting that never dims. The entrance disappears the moment you're inside. Over 3,000 people are currently trapped, forming communities with names like Exchangeland, building settlements from furniture while searching for exits that don't exist. They've lived there for years, decades, eating Swedish meatballs of unknown origin. The real horror starts at night. That's when SCP-3008-2 entities become active. 7-foot-tall IKEA employees with unmoving smiles and stretching arms. They hunt survivors while cheerfully announcing, "The store is now closed. Please exit the building," as they literally tear people apart. What's most disturbing? Long-term survivors stop wanting to leave. They describe our finite world as too small. They're not just trapped in retail hell, they're becoming native to it, transformed by infinite consumer culture into something designed for eternal shopping. SCP-610. SCP-610 is a contagious skin condition classified as Keter, first documented near Lake Baikal in 1999. Initial symptoms resemble severe dermatitis, but rapid progression transforms human tissue into writhing, aggressive biomass that retains some degree of consciousness. Infected individuals develop additional limbs, sensory organs, and orifices in random locations. The flesh continues growing and reshaping itself, creating grotesque amalgamations that bear little resemblance to their original human form. These entities exhibit pack-hunting behavior and actively seek to spread the infection. The condition spreads through skin contact, consumption of infected tissue, or even proximity to late-stage specimens. Infected areas develop a collective consciousness. Individual entities begin coordinating their movements and sharing sensory information across vast distances. SCP-610 represents evolution's ultimate rejection of human form, a disease that doesn't kill but transforms, creating something that was once human but is now actively hostile to humanity. The infected retain enough consciousness to suffer but gain enough alien perspective to view uninfected humans as the aberration. We become strangers in our own flesh, witnesses to our own monstrous transformation. SCP-049. He stands 1.9 meters tall, wearing the thick robes and ceramic mask of a medieval plague doctor, though these garments have grown from his body over time. SCP-049 speaks multiple languages and maintains a cordial demeanor with Foundation staff, but becomes agitated when he detects the pestilence. His touch causes all biological functions to cease through direct skin contact. After killing, he performs crude surgery using implements from a black doctor's bag with anomalously large internal space. These surgeries often create SCP-49-2 instances, reanimated corpses lacking memories or higher brain functions, possessing only basic motor skills. He genuinely believes he's curing humanity of a plague, showing frustration and remorse when his cure fails to eliminate the pestilence. When asked about the bubonic plague, SCP-49 stated he didn't know what that was. He detects this pestilence in healthy individuals, while claiming all humans have potential to be infected. On April 16, 2017, he killed Dr. Raymond Ham during an interview, converting him into an SCP-049-2 instance. The most disturbing question remains unanswered. What exactly is the pestilence he's trying to cure? Some theorize it's life itself, that he believes existence destroys human souls and must be purged. He insists he's humanity's savior, the only one capable of administering the cure to end all cures. And maybe, just maybe, he's right. What if we are infected, and death is the cure? SCP-3010. SCP-3010 is not an object or creature. It's a spatial anomaly triggered by specific conditions. It doesn't live in one place, but rather activates inside environments that match a pattern. Quiet, fully furnished buildings with at least 500 square meters of space, often resembling a lived-in home. When conditions are right, the anomaly manifests through paranoia, sensory hallucinations, and eventual spatial distortion. Individuals exposed to SCP-3010 begin to believe they are being watched. They'll avoid windows, mirrors, and even reflective surfaces. These symptoms grow worse over time, leading to insomnia, extreme anxiety, and eventually a total break from reality. The anomaly has been observed to physically change the environment. Rooms extend beyond their normal size. Hallways loop. Doorways vanish. Victims become disoriented and often disappear entirely, even when under surveillance. Those who survive describe someone else being present, something not visible but always nearby. Containment isn't about locking SCP-3010 away. It's about preventing conditions where it might activate. The Foundation has protocols to identify high-risk environments and deploy psychological screening tools to detect early symptoms. SCP-3010 exploits familiarity and comfort, turning normal homes into shifting prisons. It's not what you see, it's what you feel that makes it deadly. SCP-3076. It looks fragile. An albino black-billed magpie perched on a branch, feathers pale as chalk. A bird so small it should vanish into the sky. But SCP-3076 doesn't kill with talons. It kills with hunger, the kind that blossoms inside your mind. Watch too long, and the urge begins. A sketch, a carving, a poem scratched into the wall with your fingernails. At first, it feels like inspiration, a rush of purpose, a joy that drowns out everything else. But joy sharpens into mania. Days pass without food, hands blister, blood stains the paper, the clay, the floorboards, and still you keep creating. Victims beg not for release, but for more materials. Anything will do. Wood, stone, flesh if necessary. They collapse mid-stroke, smiling through starvation, convinced their final work is incomplete. The Foundation can cage the bird, but not its influence. A glimpse, even a fleeting one, is enough to plant the compulsion. Researchers cover their eyes, avert cameras, whisper warnings like prayers. SCP-3076 proves destruction doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers through the joy of creation, until nothing remains of the creator, except the art left behind.
Subscribe for more interesting stuff. Tell us your experience in the comments.